I think I understand the safety protocols and the safety mentality very, very well. And these guys broke the rules. It's that simple.
I think I understand the safety protocols and the safety mentality very, very well, and these guys broke the rules. It's that simple. 5 wealthy explorers descended into the ocean chasing a dream few dared attempt. They were diving in something which really was a ticking time bomb. But just hours later, they met their end somewhere near the Titanic's resting place. Their vessel was crushed with terrifying force. The implosion happened in milliseconds, leaving no chance to survive. I think Stockton was designing a mousetrap for billionaires. At first, the world mourned a tragic accident. But what if it wasn't an accident at all? What if this disaster was years in the making? The Titan sub disaster, finally solved, and it was worse than we thought. This is the inside story of OceanGate, taking a completely new approach to the sub design. And it's all run with this game controller and these touch screens. So if you want to go forward, you press forward. If you want to go back, you go back. Turn left, turn right, go down, go up, and it's Bluetooth, so I can hand it to anybody. A $250,000 ticket to death. It began as a luxury thrill ride into the deep, an exclusive voyage meant only for the world's wealthiest and bravest. On the morning of June 18, 2023, 5 men boarded a vessel smaller than a minivan, bolted shut from the outside, with no seats and only one push-button toilet. The goal was to descend nearly 12,500 feet beneath the Atlantic Ocean and lay eyes on the decaying remains of the Titanic, a ship already known for tragedy. But what they didn't know was that they weren't just diving into history, they were diving into doom. Each seat on the Titan cost $250,000, a price that promised adventure and status. Among the crew was Stockton Rush, CEO of OceanGate and the brain behind the submersible itself. He wasn't just piloting the vessel, he was gambling his life on an experimental design he swore was safe. With him was Hamish Harding, a British billionaire and seasoned adventurer who once flew to space aboard Blue Origin's rocket. There was Paul-Henri Nargeolet, a former French Navy commander and Titanic expert nicknamed Mr. Titanic for his dozens of dives to the wreck. The final 2 passengers were Shahzada Dawood, a Pakistani-British businessman, and his 19-year-old son Suleiman, who had reportedly been hesitant about the trip but joined to bond with his father. They launched from a mothership named the Polar Prince, somewhere off the coast of Newfoundland. The dive started normally as the Titan began its slow descent into the crushing blackness of the deep, tethered only by occasional text messages to the surface. But 1 hour and 45 minutes in, all communication suddenly ceased. The sub had vanished. For days, the world watched in suspense, praying the 5 explorers were alive, trapped, and waiting. Experts estimated the sub had only 96 hours of oxygen, a cruel countdown that gripped headlines and haunted the families of the lost. Search teams scrambled, deploying sonar buoys, aircraft, and underwater drones. But what they didn't know then was that it was already too late. On June 22, hope turned to horror. Debris was found near the Titanic wreck site. These were twisted pieces of the Titan's titanium and carbon fiber hull. It was confirmed the vessel had imploded violently just a few hundred meters from its destination. The pressure at that depth, over 6,000 pounds per square inch, meant the craft had likely been crushed in less than 20 milliseconds. There was no warning or escape, just instant death. But as the shock faded, questions began to swirl. Why did a supposedly state-of-the-art sub collapse so suddenly? Why did it fail so close to its destination, yet so far from rescue? Was this just a tragic accident or the result of deeper problems? The Titan sub mystery has finally been solved, and one thing becomes clear: the Titan disaster wasn't just a freak accident, it was the climax of a series of decisions that, in hindsight, seem unthinkable. OceanGate's vision. OceanGate was born out of a bold ambition to revolutionize deep-sea exploration. Founded in 2009 by Stockton Rush and Guillermo Samline, OceanGate was built with the goal of pushing the boundaries of underwater technology. Rush was a man with big dreams and even bigger ideas, and he didn't just want to create a submersible, he wanted to transform deep-sea exploration. And he was willing to risk it all to achieve that goal. Rush had one mantra: safety is pure waste. This was not a quote to be taken lightly, and it quickly became a defining characteristic of his approach to OceanGate. He didn't see industry regulations or safety standards as guidelines to follow. Instead, he viewed them as obstacles to be overcome. In a world where submersibles often undergo rigorous testing and certification, Rush made a controversial choice: OceanGate would avoid classification or certification from marine safety agencies. Why? Rush believed that safety standards, particularly those from agencies like the American Bureau of Shipping, ABS, would stifle innovation. He felt that deep-sea exploration was still in its infancy and the rules of the past couldn't guide the future he wanted to create. In other words, OceanGate was going to do things its own way, even if it meant sidestepping traditional safeguards. But as bold as his vision was, it had consequences. The lack of external oversight would prove to be a critical flaw later on. Still, Rush continued to forge ahead with his grand ambitions, even when they seemed unrealistic to others. As OceanGate started to design the Titan, the company needed more than just technology, it needed attention. And there was no better way to draw that attention than by hitching their fate to the Titanic, the most famous shipwreck in history. Rush understood the allure of the Titanic. More than just a ship, it was a symbol of human ambition, failure, and tragedy. The Titanic disaster in 1912 claimed over 1,500 lives, and it remains one of the most enduring stories of the 20th century. The wreck was rediscovered in 1985, lying at a depth of 12,500 feet in the North Atlantic Ocean, an almost unimaginable distance for most of humanity. Since its discovery, the Titanic's resting place has become an object of fascination for explorers and tourists alike. For Stockton Rush, the Titanic was the perfect marketing tool. He knew that a trip to the wreck site would appeal to a wealthy elite eager to literally touch history. So he pitched the idea of exclusive submersible dives to the Titanic wreck, selling tickets for $250,000 each. It was a clever business move, turning the tragedy of the Titanic into a luxury experience for those with the money to afford it. Rush was ready to cash in on the public's obsession with the shipwreck. But he underestimated one critical factor: the technical challenges of reaching the Titanic. The Titan, designed to carry passengers to the wreck site, was not a traditional submersible. It was a radical departure from anything in use before. Unlike other submersibles that were tested, certified, and built according to stringent standards, the Titan was a first of its kind. It was crafted with materials like carbon fiber and titanium rather than the usual steel. The result was that the submersible design would eventually lead to the catastrophe that claimed the lives of the 5 explorers. In his pursuit of history and adventure, Rush ignored one simple truth: some boundaries are in place for a reason. But this was not the first time that OceanGate had pushed farther than they should have. OceanGate's early voyages and near misses. Before the Titan, OceanGate had already started its journey into deep-sea exploration with its first submersible, Cyclops 1. This vehicle was designed for shallower depths compared to the Titan, but it was still a significant step for OceanGate in its mission to innovate the world of underwater exploration. However, the company's history was marred with danger even in its earlier expeditions, highlighting a pattern that would eventually lead to the Titan disaster. One of the most significant early ventures came in 2016 when OceanGate set its sights on the Andrea Doria wreck. Dubbed the Mount Everest of diving, the Andrea Doria lies off the coast of Massachusetts at a depth of around 240 feet, making it one of the most challenging wrecks to explore. The Andrea Doria wreck had claimed the lives of 52 people when it sank in 1956. Since then, it has become a sought-after site for deep-sea explorers, but it is notoriously dangerous due to unpredictable weather, swift currents, and tricky navigation. OceanGate, eager to prove the viability of its technology, launched a dive to this perilous site using Cyclops 1. While the company advertised the mission as a success, the reality was far darker. A 2023 Vanity Fair article revealed that the mission was anything but smooth sailing. According to accounts from the crew, technical failures aboard Cyclops 1 sent the expedition into a chaotic situation. The submersible experienced serious malfunctions during the dive, with panic setting in among the team as they struggled to control the vehicle in the unforgiving depths. One of the most troubling details to emerge from the expedition was the lack of preparedness for such technical issues. The submersible's design and operational limitations quickly became apparent, and there were serious doubts about the crew's ability to handle the complications. Yet despite the close call, OceanGate was quick to spin the event as a success, with CEO Stockton Rush continuing to promote the company's deep-sea expertise to the media. These early warning signs were glaringly evident to those involved in the expedition. But instead of taking them as lessons, Rush and his team brushed them off as inevitable risks in the pursuit of innovation. The company's desire to keep the public image of success intact became a consistent theme, one that would only deepen as they set their sights on the ultimate prize, the Titanic. Instead of slowing down, OceanGate pushed ahead, taking the Andrea Doria mission as validation that they could handle the complexities of deep-sea exploration. The near disaster didn't lead to a reassessment of the company's practices. In fact, it further fueled their belief that they were on the right path. And they would continue to cut corners and downplay safety concerns, driving them toward the ill-fated Titan expedition. This reckless drive for success, ignoring critical warnings, set the stage for the events that would unfold on June 18, 2023. OceanGate's early voyages and near misses were but a precursor to the disaster that would soon follow, leaving a chilling trail of ignored red flags and oversights in their wake. Early red flags and warnings ignored. Right up to the time the Titan vanished beneath the Atlantic, the alarm bells were already ringing. OceanGate's bold push into deep-sea tourism wasn't just risky, it was reckless, and insiders knew it. Engineers, experts, and even OceanGate's own employees had raised serious safety concerns, only to be ignored, silenced, or pushed out. In 2018, one of the most telling warnings came from David Lockridge, OceanGate's Director of Marine Operations and its designated safety advisor. Lockridge had a troubling discovery: the carbon fiber hull, a key component of the Titan, had not been adequately tested for the intense pressures of a deep-sea dive. He also flagged that the viewport, the small window allowing passengers to see outside, was only certified for depths up to 1,300 meters, far less than the 3,800-meter depth of the Titanic wreck. Even worse, Lockridge noted the lack of full-scale non-destructive testing on the hull. OceanGate had chosen not to test the carbon fiber pressure vessel under actual operating conditions, relying instead on real-time monitoring during dives. To him, this was a disaster waiting to happen. But when he raised these issues to OceanGate leadership, the response was swift and brutal: he was fired. The company later filed a lawsuit against him for allegedly breaching a non-disclosure agreement. Lockridge responded with a wrongful termination countersuit, laying bare his concerns in legal documents. The case was eventually settled, but the warnings were now part of public record. Lockridge wasn't alone. Several outside submersible experts refused to partner with OceanGate or walked away from the project altogether. In 2018, a group of industry leaders and organizations, including the Marine Technology Society, wrote a letter warning Rush against avoiding third-party certification. The Titan's carbon fiber and titanium hybrid design was untested in deep-sea conditions, and experts feared it might fail catastrophically under pressure. They were right to worry. During earlier test dives, cracks and signs of delamination, where the carbon fiber layers began to separate, had already started appearing on the Titan. These issues were quietly handled with no public disclosure and no permanent design overhaul. Inside the company, a culture of fear and urgency seemed to dominate. Employees and even sub-pilots reportedly felt pressure to perform, meet deadlines, and satisfy investors' demands for progress. Questioning decisions was often seen as disloyalty. Speaking up might mean losing your job, or worse, being blamed for delays. As one former employee put it, safety wasn't just overlooked but actively discouraged. With each ignored warning and each punished whistleblower, OceanGate drifted closer to tragedy. The Titan's fate wasn't just an accident, it was a slow-burning collapse of caution, driven by ambition and pride. The fatal flaws in the Titan's design: at first glance, the Titan looked like a symbol of innovation. It was a sleek, modern submersible built to carry Civilians were taken into one of Earth's most hostile environments, but behind the marketing and ambition was a web of untested technology, bold shortcuts, and fatal oversights that ultimately led to the sub's catastrophic implosion. The heart of the Titan's design was its carbon fiber pressure hull, a decision that set it apart, but dangerously so. Most deep-sea submersibles rely on materials like titanium or thick steel, which have decades of data supporting their performance under crushing pressures. But carbon fiber, while lighter and cheaper, behaves differently. It's strong but not fail-safe. Its layers can delaminate, meaning they peel apart after repeated stress cycles. OceanGate ignored warnings that the hull could weaken invisibly with time, making each dive a ticking time bomb. And yet, OceanGate leaned into this experimental choice. CEO Stockton Rush's philosophy bled into every aspect of the Titan's design. Instead of standard naval controls, the sub was piloted using a $30 Logitech game controller. It lacked a GPS system, since GPS doesn't work underwater, but even its basic navigation and location systems were primitive. Titan relied on text messages sent through a Starlink-connected surface ship, which was a method prone to failure. There were no external rescue systems, no automatic buoy deployment in case of loss of contact, and no backup life support redundancy. Most critically, the pressure vessel was never pressure tested to full Titanic depths under independent review. OceanGate chose to monitor the hull in real time using acoustic sensors. Instead, they listened for cracking sounds as signs of failure rather than preventing failure through certified engineering. Red flags had already appeared on several dives before the fatal one. Titan had lost communication with the surface, forcing missions to be cut short. One of the co-founders, Guillermo Slime, had reportedly left the company years earlier due to internal disagreements, including concerns about safety. Each of these design choices, such as using carbon fiber instead of titanium, lack of GPS, rudimentary controls, and no independent testing, stacked on top of one another. Separately, they were worrying. Together, they became a death sentence. OceanGate's Titan wasn't just vulnerable, it was doomed by design. And the true answer was finally uncovered in 2025, revealing something deeper, darker, and more chilling than anyone expected. The mystery was finally solved, and it isn't good. In June 2024, Wired magazine published a landmark investigation titled "The Titan Submersible Disaster Shocked the World." The inside story is more disturbing than anyone imagined. Written by journalist Mark Harris, based on internal emails, engineering logs, whistleblower interviews, and previously unreleased maintenance reports, the exposé revealed that the Titan wasn't just flawed, it was doomed by decisions that ignored clear warnings. The article didn't speculate, it proved the disaster was preventable, and the sub itself had been broadcasting its distress. According to the report, Titan's onboard acoustic monitoring system had picked up unusual creaking and crackling sounds in previous dives, audio evidence of microfractures forming inside the carbon fiber hull. These sounds were first detected as early as 2021 and grew louder in later expeditions, yet they were written off by OceanGate leadership as routine acoustic behavior at depth. Independent submersible experts told Wired that this kind of acoustic signature is often a red flag for material fatigue, especially in layered composites like carbon fiber. Even more troubling, the article revealed that warnings from within OceanGate were actively suppressed. At least 3 engineers and contractors left the company between 2021 and 2023 after expressing concerns about the Titan's structural safety. One of them, a lead design engineer, submitted a formal engineering proposal in 2022 urging a complete redesign of the pressure vessel after modeling long-term stress effects. That document was ignored and shelved, never discussed in official design meetings. Instead of pausing to address the growing risks, OceanGate pushed forward, driven by tight commercial timelines and growing investor expectations. At $250,000 per seat, Titanic dives were marketed as once-in-a-lifetime adventures for billionaires and adventurers. Safety delays were seen internally as a threat to branding and revenue. According to company emails, the Wired report also obtained fragments of Titan's final dive log. Just minutes before the submersible lost contact on June 18, 2023, one passenger reported feeling an odd vibration. Another described a high-pitched sound, like distant metal flexing. These were real-time signs of the sub's structural integrity deteriorating, but there was no protocol to abort the dive. No distress call was made. Moments later, the pressure hull collapsed. The internal environment was one of mounting denial. Employees who tried to voice concerns felt their careers were at risk. One technician recalled overhearing a senior manager dismiss safety critiques as fear-based thinking that stifles innovation. The most haunting moment came in the form of a 2023 internal email from a junior engineer. After reviewing sensor data, its subject line was simple: "This is terrible." Those 3 words became the emotional core of the investigation. They summed up the failure not just of engineering, but of ethics, leadership, and accountability. When Wired laid out its findings, the mystery surrounding Titan's implosion, once the subject of intense public speculation, was finally solved. This wasn't a sudden, unforeseeable accident, it was a cascading, ignored crisis. The evidence had been there, in the sensors, in the data, in the emails, in the voices of people who were pushed out or silenced. The Titan didn't just fail, it was actively neglected, step by step, decision by decision. And it was worse than we thought. What makes the Titan tragedy so haunting isn't just the violent nature of the implosion, it's the painful truth that it didn't have to happen. This wasn't a natural disaster or an unpredictable accident, it was a man-made failure caused by hubris, neglect, and a refusal to listen. OceanGate had every opportunity to pause, to reassess, redesign, or even cancel the mission altogether. The warnings weren't hidden in fine print, they were loud, repeated, and came from experts, engineers, and even former team members. But instead of seeing these concerns as a chance to improve, OceanGate dismissed them as gatekeeping. CEO Stockton Rush, obsessed with innovation and cutting through red tape, painted his critics as enemies of progress. In reality, those critics were trying to prevent a disaster, and yet, the company pressed forward until there was no turning back. Among those lost was 19-year-old Suleiman Dawood, who only joined the dive to bond with his father, Shahzada Dawood, a wealthy British-Pakistani businessman. Suleiman's relatives later revealed he was terrified of the dive and had expressed doubts beforehand. He had even planned to back out, but joined anyway to make his dad happy. This was perhaps the most heart-wrenching part of the entire story. When the Wired exposé came out in 2025, the public backlash was swift and furious. Scientists, engineers, and deep-sea professionals who had tried for years to sound the alarm felt vindicated, but not relieved. The revelations confirmed that the implosion was entirely preventable. OceanGate's story is now a cautionary tale, not just about deep-sea exploration, but about what happens when ego overrules expertise and profit outweighs caution. The Titan didn't fail because the ocean was unforgiving, it failed because those responsible for its safety believed rules didn't apply to them. And OceanGate CEO Stockton Rush paid for his pride with his life. The fallout was inevitable: lawsuits, criminal investigations, and a global debate over the future of deep-sea exploration. But the question remains, what comes next? Fallout, lawsuits, and the future of deep-sea exploration. After the Titan disaster, OceanGate quietly suspended all operations, scrubbing much of its online presence and avoiding press questions. But the silence only added to the outrage. The company's shutdown didn't erase what had happened, it simply left a void filled with grief, lawsuits, and global scrutiny. Families of the victims quickly took legal action, filing suits against OceanGate and its leadership for wrongful death, negligence, and emotional distress. Some cases focused on Stockton Rush's history of ignoring safety advice, while others zeroed in on the company's failure to warn passengers of the true risks. The lawsuits are still unfolding, but the early filings paint a damning picture of a company that put ambition over accountability. Beyond the courtroom, the global reaction was immediate and intense. The deep-sea community, once quietly skeptical of OceanGate's approach, now began calling for strict reform. Several industry groups proposed new certification standards, demanding that all commercial submersibles undergo independent testing and receive third-party